I suspect my 4-year girlfriend will dump me for her terminally ill ex and first love. Hey there. I've got a story to tell that really threw my life into chaos. It all began last week, and trust me, from that moment on, it was like I'd stepped into some sort of nightmare and couldn't wake up. I was having one of those hectic days at work. Deadlines were breathing down my neck, and to top it all off, I realized I'd left my phone at home. You know how it is these days. Our phones are practically an extension of ourselves, especially when it comes to work. I needed to send some urgent messages to colleagues about a project we were scrambling to finish. My girlfriend Lily, oh, how I used to love saying her name, had an old iPad stashed away. She'd always been sweet about stuff like that, and told me I could use it whenever work demands came up. So, I rummaged through the drawers where she usually kept it and finally pulled it out. Little did I fathom that this seemingly innocent act was about to set off a domino effect that would shatter my heart into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. I powered up the iPad, and as I was getting ready to log into my messenger, something caught my eye. Lily's Facebook account was still logged in. Now, I'm not the kind of person who goes snooping around on other people's accounts. I respect privacy, but in that moment, with all the stress and a strange urge to feel closer to her, maybe it was a subconscious need for comfort. Curiosity overpowered my better judgment. I clicked on the messenger icon, and that's when my world imploded. There they were, messages from her ex-boyfriend, Andre. My heart did a somersault. I knew they'd been together for 2 years during high school and college. She'd mentioned it in passing, but whenever I tried to ask for details, she'd kind of brush it off, like it was no big deal. I met Lily a year and a few months after they called it quits. It was during a family trip to sunny California. We were exploring this little neighborhood in LA, and I popped into a local coffee shop to grab a quick caffeine fix. That's where our paths crossed. She was sitting at a corner table, sipping her latte, and when she looked up and smiled at me, it was like the whole room lit up. She had this charm about her, this infectious energy, and before I knew it, she was offering to show me around the city. Even though I was from Australia, thousands of miles away, the distance seemed like nothing more than a minor inconvenience. We clicked instantly, and just like that, we embarked on a long-distance relationship. For an entire year, we made it work against all odds. There were countless late-night calls that lasted until the wee hours of the morning, our voices hoarse from talking, but neither of us wanting to hang up. We'd send each other care packages filled with little trinkets that reminded us of home or things we thought the other would love. And we were constantly counting down the days until we could be in each other's arms again. Then, after months of scrimping and saving, I finally managed to gather enough money to make the big move to Los Angeles for her. It wasn't a walk in the park. Finding a job was a nightmare. I must have sent out dozens of applications, gone on countless interviews, and faced rejection after rejection. But I was determined. I had this vision of building a beautiful life with Lily by my side. And for 3 years, it really did seem like we were on top of the world. We had our own little routines that made life so sweet. Every Sunday morning, rain or shine, we'd lace up our shoes and take a leisurely stroll down to that charming little bakery on the corner. The smell of freshly baked bread and pastries would fill the air as we perused the display cases, carefully picking out our favorite treats. Weeknights were reserved for cozying up on the couch. We'd make a big bowl of buttery popcorn, snuggle under a warm blanket, and binge-watch our favorite shows, laughing and gasping at all the right moments. We even had elaborate dreams of buying a house one day. It was going to be a beautiful 2-story with a wraparound porch and a big, sprawling backyard where our future dogs and cats could run around and play. But as I scrolled through those cursed messages, it all came crashing down like a house of cards. There were kiss and heart emojis littered all over the place, stabbing me in the heart with each one I saw. My stomach churned violently as I read further. The most gut-wrenching part was when I saw her talking about leaving me for a few months to go take care of Andre. Apparently, he had cancer, stage 1, but from what I could gather from their conversation, he was acting like it was the end of his life. He'd asked her to visit him at his house, and it sure sounded like she'd gone. They were reminiscing about how amazing it was to catch up, and I could literally feel my world crumbling around me brick by brick. I spent 2 agonizing days poring over those messages, reading and rereading them as if somehow the words would change if I looked at them enough times. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Lily had absolutely no clue what I'd uncovered. She went about her daily life as usual, smiling, chatting, and thinking everything was hunky-dory between us. But I was dying a slow death on the inside. I had no one to turn to in LA. All my friends were back in Australia, living their own lives, blissfully unaware of the hell I was going through. I didn't even want to think too deeply about it because every thought felt like a dagger to my heart. Every time I caught a glimpse of Lily, I had to fight back the urge to break down and sob right then and there, but I somehow managed to hold it in. I started to question everything. Had she ever truly loved me? Were the past 3 years just a carefully constructed facade? I was so lost, so confused, and so hurt that I did something truly drastic. I sat down at my desk, my hands shaking, and wrote my resignation letter for work. I figured I couldn't bear to stay in LA any longer, not with all these memories that now felt like shards of glass cutting into me. I also messaged my parents, my fingers trembling as I typed, telling them I was going to go home next month. I was at rock bottom, and I had no idea how to claw my way out of this seemingly bottomless pit. The days that followed my discovery were like walking through a thick fog of misery. I went to work like a zombie, my mind constantly replaying those damning messages. Colleagues would ask me if I was okay, and I'd just force a smile and mumble some half-hearted excuse. Inside, I was screaming. At home, it was torture. Lily would come back from work, and I'd have to pretend everything was normal. She'd kiss me on the cheek and start chatting about her day, and I'd nod along, my heart pounding in my chest. Every time she touched me, it felt like a hot iron branding my skin. I couldn't believe how oblivious she was to the storm raging inside me. I started avoiding her as much as I could. I'd stay late at work, not because I had anything to do, but just to put off going home. When I did finally get back, I'd make up some excuse about being tired and head straight to the bedroom. Lying in bed, I'd stare at the ceiling, my thoughts a chaotic mess. Should I confront her? What if it was all a misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. One night, as I was tossing and turning, Lily came in and snuggled up to me. She whispered that she loved me, and it took every ounce of self-control I had not to push her away. Instead, I just lay there, stiff as a board, until she fell asleep. Then, I quietly slipped out of bed and went to sit on the couch. I scrolled through my phone, looking at pictures of us from happier times. We were at the beach, laughing as the waves crashed at our feet. We were at a concert, our faces lit up with excitement. It all seemed so far away now. The next day, I decided I needed to do something. I couldn't keep living like this. I reached out to an old friend back in Australia, someone I hadn't talked to in ages. I spilled my guts to him over the phone, and he listened patiently. He told me I had to confront Lily, that it was the only way to get some clarity. But I was terrified. What if she left me? As much as she'd hurt me, the thought of losing her completely was still unbearable. I also started looking into flights back home. I figured if things went south, I needed an escape plan. The prices were astronomical, and I cursed myself for not having saved more money. But it didn't matter. I was desperate. That weekend, Lily suggested we go out for dinner. She said it had been a while since we'd had a date night. I agreed, mostly because I didn't want to raise any suspicions. As we sat at the restaurant, I watched her across the table. She looked so beautiful, and for a moment, I forgot about all the pain. But then, she mentioned Andre in passing, something about a mutual friend they had. My blood ran cold. I couldn't take it anymore. When we got home, I told her we needed to talk. She looked at me, a bit surprised, but nodded. We sat down on the couch, and I took a deep breath. I started by asking her about Andre, casually at first, but then my emotions got the better of me. I told her I knew about the messages, that I'd seen everything. Her face went pale. She stammered, trying to come up with an explanation. She said it was just friendly, that she felt bad for him because of his cancer. But I wasn't buying it. I asked her if she still had feelings for him, and she hesitated. That hesitation was all I needed to confirm my worst fears. We argued for hours. She cried, begging me to forgive her. I yelled, my anger finally boiling over. I told her about all the sacrifices I'd made for her, moving to a new country, struggling to find a job. She just kept saying she was sorry, but it wasn't enough. By the end of the night, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. I told her I needed time to think and locked myself in the bedroom. Lying in bed, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and as painful as it was, I didn't have to pretend anymore. But I also felt more lost than ever. What was I going to do? Should I try to salvage our relationship? Or was it too far gone? I had no answers, only a heart full of pain and a head full of questions. The morning after our explosive fight, I woke up with a heavy heart and a throbbing headache. The sun peeked through the blinds, casting a harsh light on the reality I now faced. Lily was already up, and I could hear her moving around in the kitchen. I lay in bed for a while, dreading the moment I'd have to face her again. When I finally dragged myself out of bed and walked into the kitchen, the air was thick with tension. Lily looked at me with red, swollen eyes. She tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. I made coffee, she said softly. I just nodded and reached for a mug, not trusting myself to speak. We sat at the kitchen table in silence, sipping our coffee. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional slurp or the sound of a car passing by outside. I could feel her eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze. I was still reeling from the night before, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, hurt, and confusion. After a few minutes, Lily broke the silence. I know I messed up, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I really do love you. It was just a stupid mistake. I looked up at her then, and I saw the desperation in her eyes. But I also remembered the hesitation when I asked her about her feelings for Andre. That hesitation had cut me deeper than any of her words. I took a deep breath. I don't know if I can believe that, I said, my voice shaky. You lied to me, Lily. You hid these messages from me, and you were planning to leave me to take care of him. How am I supposed to trust you now? She started to cry again, big, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I wanted to reach out and comfort her, but I couldn't. My own pain was too great. I pushed my chair back and stood up. I need some time alone, I said. I'm going for a walk. I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door before she could say anything else. As I walked down the street, my mind was racing. I thought about all the good times we'd had, all the memories we'd made. But then I also thought about the betrayal. Could I really forgive her? Could I ever forget what she'd done? I walked for hours, wandering aimlessly through the streets of LA. I passed by familiar places, the coffee shop where we'd first met, the park where we'd had picnics on sunny weekends. Each place brought back a flood of memories, but now they were tainted. When I finally got back home, it was late afternoon. Lily was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the hope in her eyes, but I didn't have any answers for her. That night, I lay in bed again, unable to sleep. I tossed and turned, my thoughts consumed by the decision I had to make. On one hand, I loved Lily. She had been my world for the past 3 years. But on the other hand, how could I stay with someone who had betrayed my trust so deeply? I thought about my family back in Australia. They had always been there for me, and they were waiting for me to come home. Maybe starting fresh back, there was the answer. The next day, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face the office, not with everything that was going on. I spent the day packing up some of my things. I didn't know if I was leaving for good, but I wanted to be prepared. As I folded my clothes and placed them in a suitcase, I felt a sense of finality. This was really happening. I was at a crossroads, and I had to make a choice. Lily came home early that day. She saw the suitcase, and her face fell. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice small. I nodded. "I don't know what I'm doing, Lily," I said, "but I can't stay here like this. I need some space to figure things out." She started to cry again, and this time, I did reach out and hug her. But it was a cold, empty hug. I didn't feel the same warmth I used to. I left the apartment that night and checked into a hotel. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew I had to make a decision soon. My heart was pulling me in two directions: back to Lily and the life we'd built together, or back home to Australia, away from the pain and the betrayal. I didn't know which way to turn, but I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. Lying in that cold, impersonal hotel bed, I felt more alone than ever. The ceiling above me seemed to stretch on endlessly, mirroring the vast emptiness inside my heart. I must have dozed off at some point, because when I opened my eyes again, the sun was streaming through the window, casting a harsh glare. I checked my phone and saw a flurry of messages from Lily. She was begging me to come home, swearing that she'd do anything to make things right. Her words tugged at my heartstrings, but I was still so raw from the hurt. I sighed and put my phone aside, knowing I couldn't face her just yet. After showering and getting dressed, I decided to meet up with another friend who lived in LA. He was one of the few people I confided in since this whole mess started. We met at a small diner downtown, and as soon as I walked in, I could see the pity in his eyes. We ordered coffee and sat down. He listened as I poured out my heart, telling him about the previous night and my current state of limbo. He nodded sympathetically and then said, "You know, you can't make this decision based on just your emotions right now. You need to think about what you really want in the long run." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. What did I want? Did I want to try and salvage what was left of my relationship with Lily? Or was I ready to cut my losses and start anew? I thanked my friend and left the diner, my mind a little clearer but still clouded with doubt. As I walked back to the hotel, I passed by a park where a couple was sitting on a bench, laughing and sharing a bag of popcorn. It was a simple scene, but it reminded me of all the times Lily and I had done the same. The memories were bittersweet, and I felt a pang in my chest. Back at the hotel, I decided to call my parents again. I needed their perspective. When I told them about the suitcase and my current living situation, my mom's voice cracked with emotion. "Honey, we just want you to be happy. If going back to Australia will make you feel better, then come home. But if you think there's still a chance with Lily, you have to be sure it's worth the risk." Their words gave me comfort, but also added to my confusion. That evening, I mustered up the courage to text Lily. I told her we needed to meet and talk things through properly. She replied immediately, saying she'd be there. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near our apartment. When I walked into the cafe, I saw her sitting at a corner table. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. As I approached, she stood up, and we just stared at each other for a moment. There was so much pain and regret in her eyes, and it made my heart ache. We sat down, and I started the conversation. "Lily, I need to know the truth. All of it. What really happened between you and Andre? And do you still have feelings for him?" She took a deep breath and began to speak. She told me that when Andre reached out to her about his cancer diagnosis, she felt obligated to help. She said she went to visit him a few times, but it was just as friends. But then, as they spent more time together, old feelings started to resurface. She admitted that she had kissed him once, but swore that it was a moment of weakness and that she regretted it immediately. I listened to her words, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to believe her, but the hurt was still so deep. "Lily, I don't know if I can trust you again. You broke my heart, but I also don't want to throw away 3 years of our lives without trying." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Please give me a chance to prove myself. I'll do anything. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." We talked for hours, going over our relationship, our dreams, and our fears. By the end of the conversation, I was still undecided, but I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could work through this. Maybe our love was strong enough to overcome this hurdle. I walked her back to the apartment, and we hugged goodbye. It was a more sincere hug than the one the night before, but there was still a lot of uncertainty. As I walked back to the hotel, I knew I had a long road ahead of me, whether I chose to stay with Lily or go back to Australia. But at least I was starting to see a way forward, a path to resolution, even if it was filled with thorns. The next few days were a strange mix of hope and hesitation. I checked out of the hotel and went back to the apartment, but things still felt off kilter. Lily was walking on eggshells around me, and I couldn't quite relax either. We decided to give counseling a shot. It was a difficult step to take, admitting that we needed outside help, but we were desperate to save what we had. The first session was awkward, to say the least. We sat in a small, quiet room with a therapist who had a kind, understanding face. As we started talking, all the pent-up emotions came pouring out. Lily cried as she recounted her guilt and confusion over Andre, and I shared my deep sense of betrayal and hurt. The therapist listened patiently and then gave us some tools to work with. She suggested we have date nights again, but this time with a focus on really communicating and reconnecting. We also started writing down our feelings in journals and sharing them with each other. It was scary at first, putting all those raw emotions on paper, but it also felt cathartic. Our first date night after the session was at a local Italian restaurant, the same one we'd gone on our first anniversary. As we sat across from each other, the candlelight flickering between us, it was like we were seeing each other in a new light. We talked about everything from our childhood dreams to our future hopes, leaving out the painful topic of Andre for now. It was a small step, but it felt significant. At home, we redecorated our bedroom. We painted the walls a soft, soothing blue and hung up new pictures of us from happier times. It was a way to symbolize a fresh start, to try and erase some of the bad memories that had tainted our space. Lily even found an old mixtape we'd made when we first started dating and put it on. As the familiar songs filled the room, we danced slowly, holding each other close. For a moment, it was like the past few weeks of turmoil had never happened. But then, one day, I got a call from Andre. I was shocked to hear his voice. He said he wanted to meet me and clear the air. I was hesitant, but after talking to Lily, we both thought it might be a good idea. So, we met at a coffee shop. He looked frail, his cancer treatment clearly taking a toll on him. He apologized for what had happened, saying he never meant to come between Lily and me. He told me that Lily had been there for him during a tough time, but he realized now that it was wrong to let old feelings resurface. Hearing his words, I felt a strange sense of closure. I could see that he was sincere, and it helped me to let go of some of the anger I'd been holding on to. After that meeting, Lily and I felt even closer. We knew we still had a long way to go, but we were committed to making it work. Months passed, and things slowly but surely got better. We continued with counseling, and our relationship grew stronger. We started making plans for the future again, like taking a trip to Australia to visit my family. The pain of what had happened was still there, but it was no longer a gaping wound. It had become a scar, a reminder of the challenges we'd overcome. As I look back on that tumultuous period of my life, I was grateful for the lessons learned. I realized that love isn't always easy, but it's worth fighting for. And now, as I stood on the balcony of our apartment, watching the sunset with Lily by my side, I knew that we'd found our way back to each other. And this time, it was a new beginning.